June 13, 2025. Tehran. The city is restless, its streets humming with the tension of a nation on the edge of war. Beneath the surface, in a fortified bunker deep below the Ministry of Defense, 30 of Iran's most powerful military minds gather in secret. The air is thick with anticipation, the low hum of fluorescent lights echoing off concrete walls. Cigarette smoke curls in the stale air, mingling with the scent of strong tea and sweat. Each general's face is etched with fatigue and resolve, their eyes fixed on the glowing screens that map out Israel's every move. Outside, the city is silent. But above, invisible to the naked eye, Israeli satellites and drones circle, their lenses trained on the bunker's entrance. Mossad operatives embedded for months monitor every signal, every heartbeat. The generals believe they are safe, protected by layers of steel and secrecy. They do not know that their meeting was orchestrated by a deception campaign years in the making. At precisely 3:08 a.m., the world changes. A ripple of coded messages passes through Israeli command. Hundreds of fighter jets roar to life, slicing through the night sky. In the bunker, a phone rings, a final fatal signal. Within 8 minutes, the heart of Iran's military command is shattered. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the distant rumble of explosions and the flicker of emergency lights. The war's most decisive moment has begun. For decades, the Middle East simmered with a shadow war between Iran and Israel, each side locked in a cycle of covert strikes, assassinations, and proxy battles. The roots of this conflict ran deep. Iran's leaders, emboldened by revolutionary zeal, called for Israel's destruction and armed militant groups across the region. Israel, in turn, viewed Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, vowing never to allow Tehran to acquire the bomb. The world watched as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the 2015 nuclear deal, crumbled. In 2018, the United States withdrew, and Iran began stockpiling enriched uranium, pushing its program ever closer to weapons-grade levels. International monitors were sidelined. Tensions escalated with each passing year, marked by cyber attacks, mysterious explosions at Iranian facilities, and the targeted killings of nuclear scientists. By 2024, the region was a tinderbox. The October 7 attacks in 2023 had already plunged Israel into open conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah, both backed by Iran. In April 2024, Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Damascus, killing senior Iranian officials. Retaliation was swift and brutal, with direct clashes erupting in Syria and Iraq. The world braced for a wider war. Negotiations for a new nuclear deal faltered in early 2025. Iran ramped up uranium enrichment, and the International Atomic Energy Agency declared Tehran non-compliant just days before the fateful strike. The United States, under President Trump, urged restraint, but Israel's patience had run out. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the region. In the early hours of June 13, 2025, the war began. Israel launched a massive surprise attack, targeting dozens of Iranian nuclear facilities, military bases, and infrastructure installations. Over 200 fighter jets dropped more than 330 munitions on about 100 targets. Mossad operatives and commando teams sabotaged Iran's air defenses, paving the way for air superiority. The opening salvo was devastating. Top military leaders, including the heads of the IRGC and the armed forces, were killed alongside prominent nuclear scientists. Iran's response was immediate and furious. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and suicide drones rained down on Israeli cities, military bases, and energy sites. The United States intercepted many of the attacks, and on June 22, joined Israel in bombing 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The world teetered on the brink of a wider conflagration as both sides absorbed punishing blows. But it was the events of that first night, the operation codenamed Red Wedding, that would define the war's course. In a single surgical strike, Israel decapitated Iran's military leadership, shattering its ability to coordinate a coherent response. The consequences would echo far beyond the bunkers of Tehran. Iran's military structure in 2025 was formidable on paper, but deeply complex in practice. The country's armed forces were split between the regular army and the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, which included elite units like the Quds Force, the Strategic Missile Command, and cyber warfare divisions. The IRGC, fiercely loyal to the supreme leader, controlled Iran's most advanced weapons and oversaw its regional proxy network. At the top stood generals like Mohammad Bagheri, Chief of Staff, and Hossein Salami, commander of the IRGC, men whose authority extended from Tehran's war rooms to battlefields across the Middle East. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks had begun to show. Years of Israeli and U.S. covert operations had eroded Iran's security apparatus. Mossad had infiltrated deep into the regime, recruiting dissidents, planting surveillance devices, and mapping the movements of key commanders. By late 2024, Israeli intelligence had identified a pattern. Iran's top generals met in person only under the strictest secrecy, often in underground bunkers shielded from electronic surveillance. These meetings were rare, but when they happened, the fate of the war could be decided in a single night. Israel's own military, the IDF, was smaller, but technologically superior. With around 170,000 active personnel and 400,000 in reserve, Israel relied on cutting-edge American and domestic weaponry, including F-35 stealth fighters, advanced missile defense systems, and a robust cyber warfare capability. The IDF's intelligence branch, Amman, worked hand-in-hand with Mossad and Shin Bet, creating a seamless web of surveillance and strike capability. By early 2025, Israel had mapped out Iran's command structure, identified vulnerabilities, and prepared a plan to decapitate the regime's military leadership in a single devastating blow. The planning for Operation Red Wedding began months before the first missile was launched. Israeli operatives, some embedded in Iran for years, fed false intelligence to the IRGC, creating the illusion of an imminent coup within the ranks. A fake phone call, crafted with chilling precision, summoned Iran's top generals to a secure bunker in Tehran on June 13, 2025. The trap was set. As the generals gathered, Mossad teams on the ground and Israeli satellites above prepared to strike. The world would soon witness the most audacious covert operation of the 21st century, a strike that would change the course of the war in just 8 minutes. In the hours before dawn, 30 of Iran's most powerful military leaders gathered in a fortified bunker beneath Tehran. Among them were Mohammad Bagheri, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, and Hossein Salami, commander of the IRGC, men whose decisions shaped the fate of the nation. Their faces bore the weight of years spent in the shadows of war, orchestrating proxy battles from Lebanon to Yemen. Some had survived assassination attempts, others had lost friends and family to the long arm of Mossad. Yet, on this night, they felt secure, surrounded by layers of steel and secrecy. The bunker was a sanctuary, a place where strategy could be discussed without fear of prying eyes. They did not know that every word, every movement, was being watched. The operation's brilliance lay in its deception. For months, Mossad operatives had fed false intelligence to the IRGC, creating the illusion of a coup plot within the ranks. A single phone call, crafted with chilling precision, summoned the generals to the bunker. The voice on the line was familiar, the message urgent. A threat to the regime required immediate action. The generals obeyed, unaware that the call was a trap. Israeli cyber teams had spoofed Iranian communications, bypassing even the most secure channels. As the generals gathered, Mossad agents on the ground and satellites above prepared to strike. The deception was total, the trap inescapable. While the generals met, Mossad commandos moved into position across Tehran. Some had been embedded in Iran for years, building networks of informants and safe houses. Others arrived in the days before the strike, smuggling weapons and equipment through a web of front companies and diplomatic pouches. Israeli drones launched from secret bases inside Iran circled above, relaying real-time video to command centers in Tel Aviv. The operation was a masterpiece of coordination. Commandos sabotaged air defenses, drones blinded radar installations, and cyber teams disrupted communications. When the order came, every piece moved in perfect synchrony, ensuring that the bunker would be isolated and vulnerable. Israel's technological edge was decisive. The operation relied on a fleet of F-35 stealth fighters, capable of evading Iran's aging radar systems and striking with pinpoint accuracy. These jets, supported by F-15s and drones, carried precision-guided munitions designed to penetrate reinforced bunkers. But the real breakthrough was in artificial intelligence. Israeli cyber teams used AI-driven analysis to map the movements of Iranian commanders, predict their meeting times, and coordinate the strike down to the second. Drones launched from secret bases inside Iran blinded air defenses and relayed live video to command centers in Tel Aviv. The result was a level of operational freedom and accuracy never before seen in modern warfare. At the heart of Operation Red Wedding was a leadership team that had spent years preparing for this moment. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, and Mossad Director David Barnea oversaw a campaign of relentless intelligence gathering and strategic deception. The operation was unprecedented in scale. Over 100 foreign agents were deployed inside Iran, missile systems were smuggled in and hidden near key targets, and commando teams rehearsed the strike for months. The planners knew that success depended on perfect timing and absolute secrecy. Every detail was scrutinized, every contingency considered. When the order came, the entire apparatus moved as one, executing a plan that had been years in the making. For Iran, the operation was a nightmare realized. Despite years of counterintelligence efforts, the regime failed to detect the depth of Israeli infiltration. Mossad's network of informants and dissidents provided real-time intelligence, while cyber teams bypassed even the most secure communications. The generals believed they were safe, protected by layers of security and secrecy. But in reality, their every move was monitored, their defenses compromised. The failure to detect the deception, the inability to protect the bunker, and the loss of so many senior leaders in a single strike exposed the regime's vulnerabilities to the world. The decisive moment arrived in the early hours of June 13, 2025. As the city of Tehran slept, Israeli fighter jets, over 200 strong, roared into Iranian airspace, their radar signatures masked by a web of electronic warfare and cyber sabotage. Mossad operatives, having already sabotaged Iran's air defenses and missile infrastructure, relayed the final go-ahead. In a covert drone base near Tehran, operators launched swarms of UAVs, blinding radar and jamming communications. The bunker, once thought impenetrable, was now isolated, its defenders deaf and blind. Inside, the 30 generals remained unaware of the storm about to break. The phone call that had summoned them was a masterpiece of deception, crafted by Israeli cyber teams to mimic the voice and urgency of Iran's highest authority. As the minutes ticked by, Israeli commandos on the ground confirmed the target's presence. The order was given. At precisely 3:08 a.m., the first wave struck. Precision-guided munitions, launched from F-35s and drones, penetrated the bunker's reinforced concrete. The explosions were deafening, the shock waves shattering steel and bone alike. In less than 8 minutes, the heart of Iran's military command was obliterated. Among the dead were Mohammad Bagheri, Hossein Salami, and nearly every senior officer responsible for Iran's war effort. Simultaneously, Operation Narnia unfolded across Tehran. Israeli teams targeted the homes of Iran's top nuclear scientists, eliminating 9 in coordinated strikes. The city was plunged into chaos. Sirens wailed, emergency lights flickered, and the regime's chain of command was severed in a single surgical blow. The world watched in stunned silence as news of the massacre spread. In just 8 minutes, Israel had changed the course of the war, decapitating Iran's leadership and crippling its ability to retaliate. The aftermath of the strike was immediate and catastrophic for Iran's military command. In the space of 8 minutes, the bunker's reinforced walls became a tomb for the nation's most senior officers. Among the dead were Major General Mohammad Bagheri, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Major General Hossein Salami, Commander-in-Chief of the IRGC, and a host of other top commanders including Gholamreza Merabi Mehdi Rabbani and Mohammad Kazemi, head of the IRGC's intelligence organization. The loss of these leaders sent shockwaves through the regime, leaving a vacuum at the very top of Iran's military hierarchy. Simultaneously, Israeli teams executed Operation Narnia, targeting the homes of Iran's leading nuclear scientists. At least 9 scientists were killed in coordinated strikes, further crippling Iran's ability to respond. The city of Tehran was thrown into chaos. Sirens blared, emergency services scrambled, and the regime's chain of command was severed in a single, surgical blow. The Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, moved quickly to appoint replacements, but the damage was done. The regime's ability to coordinate a coherent response was shattered. Across the region, news of the massacre spread rapidly. Iranian state media struggled to contain the narrative, while international observers watched in stunned silence. The world had witnessed the most audacious covert operation of the 21st century, a strike that changed the course of the war in just 8 minutes. The consequences of Operation Red Wedding would reverberate far beyond the bunkers of Tehran, setting the stage for a new phase in the conflict. The immediate aftermath of Operation Red Wedding was a scene of devastation and confusion within Iran's military hierarchy. In less than 10 minutes, the nation had lost its chief of staff, Mohammad Bagheri, IRGC commander Hossein Salami, and a constellation of senior officers responsible for intelligence, operations, and air defense. The elite aerospace division, which oversaw Iran's missile and drone programs, was decimated, with its long-serving chief Ali Akbar Hajizadeh and 8 senior commanders killed in the bunker strike. The loss of these leaders left Iran's armed forces paralyzed, unable to coordinate a coherent response as Israeli jets continued their assault. Across Tehran, the regime scrambled to appoint replacements, but the damage was done. The supreme leader moved quickly to fill the vacuum, naming new commanders for the army and the IRGC, yet the new appointees faced an impossible task: restoring order and morale in the wake of unprecedented losses. The funerals that followed were somber affairs, attended by thousands of mourners and marked by a palpable sense of shock and grief. State media struggled to contain the narrative, while international observers watched as Iran's military command structure was rebuilt from the ground up. For Israel, the operation was a triumph of intelligence, technology, and coordination. The decapitation strike crippled Iran's ability to retaliate, granting Israel air superiority and freedom of action across the region. The world had witnessed the most audacious covert operation of the century, a strike that changed the course of the war in just 8 minutes. The strategic impact of Operation Red Wedding was felt immediately and reverberated for weeks. Iran's military command was decimated, with at least 30 senior officers and commanders killed in the opening minutes of the war. The IRGC's elite aerospace division, responsible for Iran's missile and drone programs, lost 8 senior leaders in a single strike, crippling its ability to coordinate retaliatory attacks. The deaths of Mohammad Bagheri, Hossein Salami, and other top officials left a vacuum that could not be filled overnight. Iran scrambled to appoint new commanders, but the replacements faced an impossible task: restoring order and morale in the wake of unprecedented losses. The regime's ability to coordinate a coherent response was shattered, and its military operations were thrown into disarray. The funerals that followed were somber affairs, attended by thousands of mourners and marked by a palpable sense of shock and grief. State media struggled to contain the narrative, while international observers watched as Iran's military command structure was rebuilt from the ground up. For Israel, the operation was a triumph of intelligence, technology, and coordination. The decapitation strike crippled Iran's ability to retaliate, granting Israel air superiority and freedom of action across the region. The world had witnessed the most audacious covert operation of the century, a strike that changed the course of the war in just 8 minutes. Operation Red Wedding marked a turning point in the history of modern warfare. In just 8 minutes, Israel's intelligence, technological mastery, and relentless preparation converged to decapitate the heart of Iran's military command. The operation's success was not merely a triumph of tactics, but a demonstration of how deception, cyber warfare, and precision strikes have reshaped the battlefield. The loss of 30 senior Iranian generals and numerous nuclear scientists sent shockwaves through the region. forcing adversaries to reconsider the vulnerability of even their most secure assets. For the families of those lost, the cost was immeasurable. The funerals in Tehran, attended by thousands, were a somber reminder of the human toll exacted by intelligence wars fought in the shadows. Yet for Israel, the operation was a statement of resolve, a message that existential threats would be met with overwhelming force and ingenuity. The world watched as the balance of power shifted and the rules of engagement were rewritten. In the aftermath, leaders and strategists across the globe reflected on the lessons of Red Wedding. The operation proved that in the age of cyber warfare and AI-driven intelligence, no fortress is truly impregnable. The line between victory and catastrophe is measured in minutes, and the fate of nations can hinge on a single, well-executed deception. As the dust settled, the Middle East entered a new era, one defined not just by missiles and armies, but by the invisible hand of intelligence, technology, and the relentless pursuit of security.